Okay, hello. Welcome to Module 3, Week 3. Hopefully, hopefully everyone's doing well out there, staying healthy, wearing your masks. COVID is still very much out there, so hopefully everyone's dealing with that okay. Um, this week we're going to be getting into what I'm going to call tree biology, and I'm kind of lumping together like several different things, several different topics that we're going to sort of get through here and into one and calling it tree biology. And on that note, so we're going to talk about tree. We're going to talk about tree anatomy, a little bit of tree identification, and then we're going to talk about sort of plant growth and tree growth and development stuff. And I'm, I'm taking the Bruce Lee approach here in the sense that you could take an entire course on pretty much any of these things. So we're going to condense all of that into one module here. I'm going to. And so it's not in any way meant to be a comprehensive view of all of these things. I'm just giving you enough that I think it's going to be useful for us to have, sort of a working idea of and vocabulary of some of these things as we go forward. Specifically, when we get into things like ecosystem functions of trees, and how do they do some of the things that they do for us. Well, some of that has to do with how they grow and their physiology and development. And also, when we here, I'm going to cover some anatomy stuff. I'm not going to go into all of that, but just enough for you to have a working vocabulary of some things and sort of have an idea of how you can go about identifying trees and some tricks for identifying some common species of trees. So let's get into that. I want to start off here talking about branching structure, and what we're dealing with here is literally the pattern of where branches and twigs and leaves appear on a particular branch when you're looking at it. And so there's two basic patterns here. There's opposite branching structure or branching pattern, where if you're looking at a twig, and here we have our twig and we have little bud. These are the buds here. These would be sort of axillary buds, and this would be a terminal bud. If the buds or the leaves or even branches are appearing on directly opposite sides of each other, like they are here, then that's going to be an opposite branching pattern. And this is about as basic as it seems. If they alternate, if you have one on one side and then a little bit of distance, then another one on another side, and if we had more, this one would be down here, and then you have another one over here, and then over here. That's going to be an alternate branching pattern. And again, it's only showing the buds here, but this is going to apply to leaves and in other branches. Whatever it is are all going to, if a species is has opposite pattern, then everything's going to appear that way. It's alternate, they're all going to appear that way. So if we wanted to look at an example, and this looks like probably a sugar maple tree species here. Here you can see that opposite branching pattern, where these are two actual branches coming off here, and they're directly opposite of one another. It's kind of hard to see the specific leaves in this picture, but they would, those would be opposite as well. And if you could, if we could see any buds, those would be opposite. So that's very, all maples have opposite branching pattern, and so that's very pretty distinctive in species that have opposite. You can tell pretty easily. Alternate branching pattern would look something like this. Now this is, there's no leaves. Well, there's a few leaves on this one. This is probably, it's kind of hard to tell. Probably some sort of oak, but it has alternate. So here you can kind of, here's where a bud was, and here's where a bud was, and there might be branches later on or earlier or somewhere else. But you can kind of see that pattern where it's on one side here, and then another side here, and then kind of another side over here. And it's not always going to be exact. You might have to look at multiple branches and multiple twigs. Alternate can be a little bit trickier because they can appear really close together on some of them, especially maybe the newer ones that haven't grown as much. But if you look, if you look at more of them, you're going to see more alternating patterns as opposed to opposite branching. Is usually really distinctive. Okay, so that's branching pattern. Let's talk about leaf arrangement a little bit. So the most basic leaf you could have would be just a simple leaf. And all of this is going to really depend on where the bud is located. So the bud, if you had a branch sort of right here, you would have a bud that would be right here. And every single leaf would have its own bud that's going to appear sort of in between, the leaf's going to be in between the bud and the twig or branch or whatever we had here. So that would be there'd be one bud per one leaf. And in that case, you have a simple leaf. A compound leaf is a little bit different and there's different types of leaves, but in all of them, you're going to have multiple leaflets for one bud. So you can kind of see they're kind of showing the bud down here, but you would have one bud here, and this entire thing is actually um, one leaf with multiple leaflets. And we call that a compound leaf. And what you have here in the center, if you have the petiole, which is this structure that connects the leaf to the branch, you have a petiole, but then when the leaflets are coming off of there, that's actually what's called a rachis. And that's not super important for you to memorize those terms. But I think what's important is that you understand that if there's one bud and you have multiple leaflets, this whole thing is one leaf, and we call that pinnately compound because there's one rachis and multiple leaflets coming off each one. You can also have palmately compound where you just have a petiole. There's no rachis here, and you can't really see the petiole, but let's assume there's one there and it's attaching. There's no rachis. There's no thing that all of these are branching off of. They're all coming off of one single point here, sort of like the shape of your palm, and that would be palmately compound. You could also have bipinnately or even tripinnately compound leaves, where similar to this, you'd have one bud down here. Can't really see it in this illustration, but you'd have one bud here. This entire thing is one single leaf. And so you're going to have multiple rachii. I'm not really sure what the plural of rachis is, but this would be a rachis, and then you'd have a sort of a secondary rachis here, and the petioles are coming. This is like the leaflets are coming off of here, and so it's not super important that you memorize these specific terms. The important thing is that the way you understand if something is compound or not is you look for a bud. There's not going to be any buds in here, or even at this point. There's going to be one bud, and it'll be right here where it attaches to the stem, and that's how you know this whole thing is one single leaf. This whole thing is one leaf. This is one leaf. This is also one leaf, and it all depends on where the bud is. And so if we were to look at some examples here, these would be simple leaves, and there's like a vine growing on here, so it's not super easy to tell. It's hard to get pictures that show leaves and buds because some buds can be pretty small, but there's a bud in here, and this would be one leaf. So all of these are simple leaves. Here we have a compound leaf where again you can kind of maybe see a bud in there, not really. But this whole thing is a compound leaf, and you have your individual leaflets here, and you have your rachis running along here. Don't need to memorize all those terms, but understand that you have a bud that's down here, and that's going to determine that this whole thing is one single leaf structure. Okay, another thing that's worth talking a little bit about is leaf shape. Now, there's actually a lot of different leaf shapes, and I'm not going to go too much into all of them, but it's some of the more common ones. This leaf shape where you have these lobes sticking out here, separated by what's called a sinus. This is very common, and this, if you're not familiar, this is an oak leaf right here, and this is what almost every oak leaf ever is going to look like, where it has these lobes and separated by sinuses. This is distinct of every oak species has this general shape. Now, some of them have different margins. The edge here is called the margin. So some of them have different margins where they're pointed, or sometimes they're smooth, sort of like this, sort of entire or smooth. That's going to be different between different oak species, but just about every oak is going to have this general shape where it has these sinuses, and sinuses may be different and the leaf size may be different, but the overall shape is going to look somewhat like this. But that's definitely not the only, sometimes you have sort of a oval shaped leaf like this, which is appropriately named ovate. And this time it has sort of a serrated margin where it almost looks like the tooth, or like the blade of a saw or something, where it's serrated. And that's pretty common, even though the shape can be different, you can have serrated margins on different shapes. You can have doubly serrated margins, or it can be smooth and entire, and it can be oblong, and different shapes and margins are being shown here. And again, you don't have to memorize these necessarily, but it's a good idea to have some understanding of how different leaf shapes emerge, and what different shapes are out there, because they can be distinctive if you're trying to tell one species from another. Some bud characteristics here. So here we're seeing, this is obviously this is not what every single bud is going to look like, but here's where buds usually occur. They occur in between the leaf and the stem. You'll see a little bud, and some of them are very large, some of them are small, and there'll be a terminal bud on the end, but then there'll also be axillary buds that occur lower on the branch as well. And if sometimes there will be a leaf present here. If there's not a leaf, like if it's closer towards the main trunk of the stem of the tree, then that means it's an older, that part of the branch is older, and you might have actual scars here. So what that means is there was a leaf here at one point. And we're talking about deciduous species here that actually lose their leaves, every time that happens, it leaves a leaf scar. So you get what's called this leaf scar underneath the buds, and that shows where a leaf was. And in there, and these are actually important, can be important if you're trying to determine, different species. If a certain species is kind of hard to tell from one another, you can use these characteristics. Where the shape of the leaf scar is distinctive, and the arrangement of bundle scars. And I'll get into what bundle scars are later on. Basically, it's vascular tissue. Trees have I don't want to say veins and arteries like we do, but they have vascular tissue. And so when these leaves fall off, the arrangement of that vascular tissue leaves a particular scar within the leaf scars, and that can be useful for identifying different species from one another. We're not going to get too much into that level of it, but it's something to be aware of. And then also on the bark, there's lenticels that can show up in different forms. These are for gas exchange usually, and they function in that way, but some species have them, some species, they're very visible, some of them are not very visible. Again, that kind of goes beyond where we're going to go with this, but something to be aware of. Most guides, most field guides are definitely going to mention lenticels and things like leaf scars and leaf shapes and things like that. So here's a good example. This might be tulip, has really distinctive, or it might be ash actually, but just kind of guessing at this point. I would need to see some more stuff, but this is a very distinctive one where you can see this entire thing is going to be the leaf scar, and then you have bundle scars in there, and these can be distinctive features. Another distinctive feature is where, so here's sort of the bud. It hasn't really formed, so this is during winter, and you're not really seeing a distinctive bud here, but a bud would be here, and it's kind of forming or has formed depending on when this is. But where that occurs, so here it's kind of indented into the leaf scar, so you get this like horseshoe kind of shape here of the leaf scar. That's not always the case. Sometimes the top of the leaf scar is sort of straight across, and the bud is sitting sort of on top of it up there. That can definitely occur as well. But again, so this entire thing would be a leaf scar. The leaf has fallen off here and left a scar. And then you have the bundle scars occurring inside there. Okay, so um, those are some identifying features, and I'm going to give you an assignment here, and just bear with me here because there's going to be some more information about how to identify trees here. But I'm going to give you an assignment, and it's a little bit different. You know, we've been doing quizzes and discussions, and I think that can get really boring. And tree identification is one of those things where it's nice out, and this is a forestry course, so I'm going to force you guys to go outside. If you have an issue with this assignment or some sort of reason where you can't go outside or whatever that is, please let me know, and we'll figure something out. But for everyone else, so you're going to go outside and you're going to identify some trees using the characteristics I just gave you. So let me just outline this a little bit. So I'll put these slides up so you have them. But what I've also uploaded is this book here called The Native Trees of the Midwest Guide. It's on Canvas and it's in the textbook folder within the files tab is where that's located on Canvas. So you'll see that textbook. It's this. It has some of the same illustrations, but also has a good guide for identifying species. And just bear with me because I have some more information I'm going to give you after this. But what this assignment is you're going to identify 5 trees to the genus level. So, you know, whether it's a maple or an ash or an oak or something like that, a sycamore or something. 5 to that level, and then 5 additional to the species level. Obviously, getting it to the genus is much easier than getting it to the species level. So you're sort of going to get practice with both here. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to take a picture of each one and then upload the picture and the ID to Canvas. So one way you could do this is you could just make like a list in Word or Google Docs or whatever, and just like sort of give me a list of the trees that you identified, and then submit that, and then Canvas allows you to submit other files along with your submission. So you can upload your photos that way, or you can put it all into a Word document. I don't really care how you do it. Just take a picture and tell me what the ID of the trees that you did was 5 to the genus level and 5 to the species level. And you can use this guide. I'm going to also, after this video, I'll post some links to additional guides that can be useful. This one's pretty good, but there's tons of, I'll put some other resources out there for you to identify species, but this one is sort of organized using those characteristics that we just went over: branching structure and leaf shape and leaf arrangement and things like that. Also, though, there's a bonus here. So there's an app called iNaturalist that can be really handy when you're trying to identify things. And so if you use iNaturalist, if you contribute to their portal, so basically iNaturalist is like this crowdsourced thing where you can download the app and you can take a picture and identify pretty much anything. It could be any plant, it could be a bird, it could be a mammal, an insect, an arthropod, any sort of species. If you document it and then put the location and submit it to iNaturalist, I'll give you bonus points if you do that for the trees that you pick. But the purpose of iNaturalist is actually lots of scientists are starting to use this data because it gives people an idea of where certain species are occurring, and how you can get diversity metrics and all sorts of cool stuff that you can look at for scientists. So it's actually an important resource, but it has a feature in there where it can help you identify things. So if you use iNaturalist, I'll give you bonus points if you actually submit your contributions to, and you can do that right through the app. But if you do that, take a screenshot and add that to your submission, and I'll give you some bonus points. You don't have to do it. You don't even have to use iNaturalist at all. You can just use these guides. But it's up to you how you want to do that. But one thing I want to see is in your pictures, try to get a picture. If you use the branching structure to help identify, if you use the leaf shape, try to get a picture of something of the characteristic that you actually used in order to make that determination, so that I can, like, oh, that's how they figured it out. Okay, so I'll put that the next page, I have some other stuff I'm going to go over here, but the next page after this video will have some more information on resources for identifying trees, and then after that will be the assignment on campus. So look out for that. Okay, so just a couple of things. So if you're thinking like, whoa, hey, you didn't really even show me any species, I'm going to give you some tricks, but it's also intentional. So I could show you a bunch of pictures of different species and say, this is a sugar maple and this is a black oak, and we could do that. But it's actually not a great way to learn. And trust me from experience, the best way is to really just force you to get out there and use some of these characteristics to look at species. But I am going to give you a few tricks that will make this much quicker, and they're tricks that foresters and ecologists and stuff use for sort of narrowing things down. And the guide that I gave you will be organized based around these quick, simple tricks. So we talked about branching structure and leaf arrangement. These two things alone can help you narrow things down really quickly, and they're really easy to use. And so some patterns here, some tricks are sort of what I'll go over here. So if something has opposite branching and simple leaves, then this is really just applying to tree species. We're not talking about other types of plants. We're sort of just talking about trees and shrubs here. If it has opposite branching and simple leaves, then it's either going to be maple, privet, which you're not even going to run into because, well, you may, but we're not really. That's sort of a shrubbish sort of thing. Maple and dogwood are going to be the most common ones that you're going to run into. So it has the branches and leaves are on opposite sides, and the leaves are simple. They're not compound, they are simple. This is the genus, the groups that you're going to find. Now there's multiple types of maple and there's multiple types of dogwood, but you can narrow things down really quickly by if it has this, then it must be in one of these groups. And the guide, excuse me, the guide that I gave you will also, is organized in this way. Similarly, if it has opposite branching and compound leaves, then it's going to be an ash, box elder, or a buckeye. So here, the opposite is also the same, but they have compound leaves here. And again, the difference between compound and simple is just where that bud is. You can refer to the guide, or you can refer back to those illustrations, or these resources that I'm going to give you will help illustrate those. But really, even if I gave you pictures of all these things, you're not going to memorize them. The real way to cement this stuff in your memory is to go out and look at actual tree species, or actual trees, and identify what they are. So that's why I'm intentionally not giving you that many examples of this stuff, other than just what the general structures look like. If something has alternate, so those were the groups for opposite, and obviously they're much fewer. Most things are actually alternate, as you can see. So if something has alternate branching and simple leaves, this is sort of the largest grouping. So there's a lot of different things it could be, and you're going to have to use different characteristics, like leaf shape is very distinctive for oaks. Bark is very distinctive, which you didn't really talk about, but the guides will outlay that, and leaf shape is very distinctive for sycamore as well. You can pretty much narrow things down into these categories with just the characteristics that I gave you, which is why we're not going too much beyond that. But if it has alternate branching and simple leaves, it's going to be in one of these groups, which this is the most common one. Opposite and compound. Looks like I have the same slide. So in this video, they're going to be the same, but I will change that when I upload the slides, and you will have different lists here because there's not as many. For the last slide should have been alternate branching, simple leaves, but we're getting the wrong. This is the same list for both of them, so I'll fix that in the slides when I upload them, so that you have a list. But this is just more just to give you a heads up on what these tricks are. I would not, you're not going to be able to just use these lists. I'm trying to show you how the guide is organized. So refer to the guide. It'll be organized based on, whether something is alternate or opposite, and whether it has compound leaves or simple leaves. It'll give you some other characteristics, and it has really good images in there for you to use to reference, and it has other characteristics for you to use as well. So basically, the point is to get your hands on that guide and get you outside and working on a little bit of that. So that's going to be the assignment. Remember, the video, we're about the end of this particular video, but there will be some other information after that, some other resources I will give you as far as other guides and ID guides to work with. So let me know if you have any questions about any of that. Otherwise, that's your assignment. It's not the end of the module. There's still more in the module here, so keep working your way through that. But hopefully this will be a little bit break up the monotony of just doing quizzes and discussions and things like that. So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.